One might assume that the whole phenomenon of trying to get calls from beyond the grave to try to communicate with those that have passed on is a new trend. But if one were to assume that, one would be wrong. There have been infamous people, such as Tesla or even Edison, that have tried to get calls from the beyond. I'm Mordecai Lacrosse, and this is Paranormal Plus. Now, the first person that we're going to talk about in this Paranormal Plus video is the infamous author of Sherlock Holmes. He was such a believer in paranormal, if you will, that he joined the British Society for Psychological Research. I maybe pronounced that wrong. Sorry. So I'll put that on the screen at some point so you can see what the society was called, if you will. But some of the members of the British Society for Psychical Research were future Prime Minister Arthur Balfour, philosopher William James, naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace, scientist William Crookes, and Oliver Lodge. I think that's it. And so, his family had been tormented for months by a phenomenon ranging from mere knocking to sounds vibrant that beds would shook and whatnot. Finally, on March 31st, 1848, after a particularly violent outbreak of noise, little Katie bravely beseeched the entity to repeat the snaps of her fingers. As Doyle tells it, every snap was echoed by a knock. However humble the operator at either end, the spiritual telegraph was at last working. So basically, he developed, it was no device per se, but he basically developed a type of thing, if you will, where it was kind of like Morse code, and the spirit would communicate through Morse code, like just of a simple, something like that. And that's how it would communicate. Now, this kind of method, it was not that uncommon. In fact, the Fox sisters also used a particular, if you will, phenomenon of knocking as well. Of course, those two were exposed later on by Harry Houdini, which I made a video previously in the past in this paranormal series of Houdini and how he went out to expose fake paranormal investigators and fake phenomenon. That video will be in the description bar down below. But basically, one of the people was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, that was a member of a paranormal research group that investigated the paranormal. Alexander Graham Bell, for instance, as you can see behind me, actually came up with the telephone as a way to communicate with the dead. In fact, there's been people in past that have said that they could communicate with the dead through telephone. They are called, phone voyants. Basically, these phone voyants claim that using the dial tone or the dead noise that you sometimes hear when you would pick up the telephone before the invention of the cell phone, because the cell phone doesn't have the same particular communication-wise, if you will. But anyways, phone voyants claim that you could use a regular landline phone to communicate with those that have passed on, similar to the white noise on the television, such made popular by such movies as, I think the movie was called White Noise. But in the movie White Noise, the person realizes they can communicate with those that have passed on using, if you will, the television white noise. I actually made a video on TikTok recently about white noise. Check the description bar down below to go check out my TikTok page. But anyways, this might actually have some backing. The whole being able to use telephones, if you will, to communicate with those that have passed on. Alexander Graham Bell, him and his brother made a pact, if you will, that whoever died first would find another way to communicate with the one who had passed on. Unfortunately, Alexander Graham Bell's brother died at the age of 19. And Alexander Graham Bell was working on a device that he could, electronic form of spirit communication. Unfortunately, a few years later, he patented something that known as the telephone, the original device that he was trying to create to communicate with his deceased brother. So, if you will, Alexander Graham Bell is another inventor. That's not some charlatan or fake medium or psychic that tried to find a way, a form of communication, if you will, to speak to those from beyond the grave. Believe it or not, but Edison, yes, that Edison, Thomas Edison himself actually also designed a device, if you will, a spirit phone to communicate with the deceased. Now, a lot of people believe it was one more way of him to try to up one on Tesla, who himself was supposedly working on a device, if you will, to also communicate with those that have passed on to the other side. In fact, it's said that on Edison's deathbed, when he was dying, he said to his wife, "I can see it. It's so beautiful on the other side." So a lot of people don't realize that Edison himself was associated a lot with the paranormal. That not only was he one of the greatest scientific minds of any time, he also supposedly designed the spirit phone. He was working on this device to contact the spirit world up until his death in 1931. As to what the device was, opinions differ. Edison never mentioned in any articles or interviews that he was trying to create a spirit phone, just a device, if you will, to communicate with those that have passed on to the other side. The term spirit phone was first devised in the 40s, and the term seems to have been applied to Edison's experiment. But it may be because for many people, Edison's name is linked with development and refinement of the telephone. Whenever Edison does refer to a device which would have the potential to contact the dead, in either an interview or an essay, he invariably described it as a valve and not a telephone. The valve, he claimed, would have had to be so sensitive that it would respond to the very slightest movement and record and amplify the barest whisper of life units. So basically, he believed that because how matter cannot be created or destroyed, he believed that what made up your body at one point after death would be somewhere out there in the atmosphere or out there, and that this device would be able to gather up that energy, if you will, and be able to somewhat communicate with you, the particles, if you will, or the life units, as he called it. He believed that these life units would be able to communicate with those here in this realm from the realm beyond. Of course, the device was never completed, and some people say that it may have been just a hoax, a practical joke, if you will. After all, he did make a joke bet, if you will, with Tesla, that caused their feud all the way up until both of their dying days. The next inventor on this list, if you will, that tried to find a way to communicate with the beyond, of the realm of the beyond, realm of the spirits, was none other than Nikola Tesla. He also tried to create a spirit phone, if you will, before, of course, Edison did. But not only that, he claimed to receive visions, if you will, similar to Old Testament prophets, in order to create inventions, such as this. The Tesla coil is one of the inventions that he claimed he received a vision, if you will, from Martians, if you will. The fact is that if these so-called visions weren't real, how exactly was he able to create the device to work exactly how it was in his vision? Other than that, like I said, he created his own spirit phone, but within his visions, he came up with all kinds of interesting devices, if you will, of his inventions. So while Edison was working on his spirit phone, Tesla was working on his own invention. Now it's similar to the spirit phone, if you will, but it was something else entirely. What his invention was basically this. There we go. This right here, known as a spirit radio. He, like Edison, believed that basically, if you will, that it would cause some kind of electrical thing, if you will, that since the spirits were electrical energy and was similar to radio waves, and that this particular device that you see here on your screen would basically be able to pick up that energy, if you will, and turn it into a radio form to where you could hear. And basically, Tesla's and Edison's idea for the spirit phone and Tesla's spirit radio, in a way, inspired what is known as the spirit box thing, if you will, that we now have, that a lot of paranormal investigators use to hear these spirits talk. So as you can see, the whole concept of trying to communicate with the afterlife, to try to communicate with those spirits from the beyond, is not necessarily new and not for whacks or charlatans. In fact, like this video has shown, some of the greatest minds, the greatest scientists of all time that we look up to, tried themselves to communicate with beyond, to prove without reasonable doubt that there is something after this life, and that in some way, in some form, even if it's just energy, that we exist after death. If you like this kind of Paranormal Plus video and you want to see more Paranormal Plus videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be notified of future Paranormal Plus videos. And there's more to come because this is Feartober. And as you know, every year on Feartober, we have tons of Paranormal Plus videos. Just hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to be notified of future Paranormal Plus videos and the rest of the Feartober videos, if you will. Comment down below if you've heard any of these stories before and what you think of these particular situations that were told about in this video. Do you think that particular device could communicate with the world beyond? Or were these all just hoaxes? I'd like to hear your feedback. So comment down below. Check the description bar down below for all the links and all that jazz.
As always, remember, when conventional science and conventional wisdom hold no answers, might we finally turn to the unconventional and improbable as the answers. Until next time, I've been your host for Paranormal Plus. I'm Mordecai Lacrosse. I'll see you on the other side.